In a sunny day, officers of the North Central Police Department were having a quiet day until a phone call disturbed everyone's peace. Someone reported that all the residents of Lipankai village suddenly disappeared and there is no trace of them. Enver Kaden was one of the detectives in the police station who was assigned to go to the village and find out what was going on. Also, an agent familiar with the area from the local police center of Naifara City was scheduled to come and help Detective Enver. Although Detective Enver had already heard of Lipankai's small population, but it was still weird that all the people of Lipankai disappeared at the same time. Enver got into his car and drove to Lipankai. To reach the village, he had to drive for about 2 hours on forest roads. On his way, he passed by Half Moon Lake and Miss Stasher's roadside restaurant, and a bit later, he reached Lipankai village, which was in the heart of the forest. Enver had heard that for several years, once the children of Lipankai turn 18, they go to the city and never come back. And this was why Lipankai consisted of men and women over 40, with no more birth happening. So, most likely this village, which currently has only 4 houses left, will be forgotten forever in a few years. Enver got out of the car and took a look around. He was a bit terrified by the silence of the village. Suddenly, he saw a man hiding among the huts. Enver raised his hands to say hi, but the man ran away. "Hey, stop!" shouted Enver. But the man did not stop and disappeared into the woods. Enver looked around hopelessly and saw a police officer coming towards him holding the unknown man. "I'm Detective Enver Kaden from North Central Police Department, and you are..."
"Charles, my name's Charles. I was sent to help you," said the young police officer.
"Good to see you, Charles. And who are you? Why were you running away from me?"
I am from this village. I was the one who called the police and reported the disappearance of the people. I didn't know you were a policeman, otherwise I wouldn't have run. Oh, and my name is Howard. Howard Drowning, by the way," said the unknown man with a trembling voice. Any ID?" said Charles. No, but I can prove I live here," said Howard. As they were walking through the village, Howard pointed to a house and said, This is my house."
"Well, how do we know you're telling us the truth?"
Okay, if you go to the kitchen and open the middle drawer, you will see 3 green knives."
Enver checked the kitchen and saw the knives, so he believed Howard. He believed him despite it wasn't strong enough as a clue. Although Enver believed Howard, Charles was still suspicious. "Charles, take a look around. See what you can find. Let me know if you found anything," Enver said to Charles.
"Got it, sir."
"And you stay on my side and don't move a muscle until I check inside. You understand what I'm saying?"
Yes, sir. Yeah, I understand."
So Enver got into Howard's house. He decided to check the bedroom first. Once he entered, he ended up with a messy room. In a messy room, something got Enver's attention. A strange symbol made of animal bones hanging on the wall. Also, there were some drops of blood on the ground. Everything seemed weird to Enver. He sat down to have a closer look, but then he saw a wallet under the bed. He reached out and took the wallet. Once he opened it, he heard Charles calling him from a distance.
Mr. Caden! Mr. Caden! Mr. Caden! Mr. Caden!
Enver got out of the house and saw Howard, who was terrified. They followed Charles's voice, which could be heard from outside of the village. A few hundred meters away, they reached Charles. "What's going on, Charles? What did you find?" Enver asked.
Don't you smell it? It smells like a corpse. I thought it might have something to do with the lost people of the village, said Charles.
They went to find out where the smell comes from, and eventually they reached somewhere the smell seems to be coming out of. A water well.
This was once full of water, but unfortunately 5 years ago it dried up for no reason, Howard said.
Can you go down and check the inside, Charles?
Well,
Charles thought for a second.
I can go down and check it out,
Howard interrupted. Amber and Charles looked at each other and said nothing. It seemed they were fine with Howard going down. Howard went down the water well, and a few minutes later he shouted, "I found a corpse! Put it up!" They pulled the body of a young naked man out. What got Amber's attention was the body seemed to have been killed recently, so the bad smell couldn't be from it. Howard, who was still in the well, said loudly, "More bodies are here!" It took an hour to take 5 bodies from the water well, including men and women. Not only the time of the death, but what made those 5 corpses different than the first one was their chests were teared open and their hearts were stolen. All these happenings shocked Enver and Charles. Among the corpses, Howard found his wife. He sat next to her body and started crying. A bit later, Howard wiped his eyes and looked at the body of the young boy. "I've seen him before. I'm pretty sure I have, but I can't remember where exactly," said Howard while he was staring at the body. Charles, who's been suspicious about Howard the whole time, whispered to Enver,
"You still think Howard is from the village? Anyone who was among the killers could have seen the green knives."
"I'm sure that Howard is from this village. My sense is never wrong," Enver said.
"It doesn't make sense because even if Howard is one of the villagers, he still can be the one who committed all these murders," said Charles.
Enver thought a little but remained quiet. He took out his phone to call for an ambulance, but he found his phone with no signal. Then he turned to Howard and said, "There's no signal here. How did you call the police?"
I went to Mrs. Thatcher's restaurant. There's a phone there," Howard answered.
Enver turned to Charles and said, "Go to restaurant by my car and call for an ambulance and back up." After Charles left, Enver sat next to Howard and said, "All these murders happened a couple of days ago. How long have you been away from home?"
I went to Night Forest for a week. I usually go there once a month and work at Mr. Petrolema's butchery," Howard replied.
Enver asked, "How many kids do you have?" I only had a son who abandoned us once he turned 18, Howard answered. Amber took a look at the young body again and said, I've got a lot of questions to ask, but it's enough for now. Then he got up and continued, Everything happened so fast that I didn't have a chance to check the village. Please wait here until the ambulance arrives. Then he left Howard to the village. As soon as Amber reached Howard's house, he remembered he has already found the wallets. Quickly he got inside and go to the bedroom and took the wallets. He opened it and looked inside. There was an ID card of a man named Joshua Lamb. Joshua's face seemed so familiar to Amber. He thought a little bit. Suddenly he recognized the face and got shocked. And at that very moment, something hit his head and he fainted. "5 days before the police arrived at Lipankai, before the sunrise, some masked men had ambushed near the village. They walked into everybody's houses in the village smoothly with a syringe in their hands. First, they anesthetized the sleeping villagers. Then they carried them out on their shoulders. One of those masked men, who was called the Wolf Eater, got into a hut, and a bit later, it could be heard that he's been fighting with someone. After a minute of silence, the Wolf Eater came out with the body of a woman on his shoulder. What was going on there? His boss asked. Nothing. She resisted a little, said the Wolf Eater, who was slightly injured. The masked men carried the bodies into a van that was parked among the trees. In the van, they took the hearts out of the bodies and threw the heartless corpse in a water well. Once their job was done, they all got into the van and drove away. 5 days later, when the Wolf Eater was leaving his house, he realized he was missing something. His wallet. He remembered that he had forgotten to take out his wallets before they went to the village. He got so stressed out and talked to his boss about it. Was your ID card in your wallet? Are you sure about that? His boss asked. Yes, the Wolf Eater said sadly. I hope the police haven't found out what happened in the village. If they have, probably we're all in trouble. Go to the red farm and submit yourself if the police have found the wallet, said his boss. Lipankai was outlying, and that was what made the Wolf Eater hopes that the police might have not found anything yet. He returned to Lipankai, and when he arrived, someone called him from behind. Once he turned away, he saw a police officer is coming towards him. At the Nye Forest City police station, while Officer Benson was talking to a young man who was recently arrested, he was given a mission to go to Lipankai. He got delighted by the given mission because he had nothing to do the most of the time. It was about half an hour by car from Nye Forest City to Lipankai. But Officer Benson knew a shortcut that could get him there in the same time. On his way, Officer Benson saw a young man who seemed to be familiar. He approached and called him. The young man stopped and turned to Officer Benson. Officer Benson came closer and said, "Joshua? Joshua Lamb?" The young man remained silent because he was a little terrified. "Don't you remember me? I'm Benson. We were classmates in Halibert School." Joshua, who was a bit calm, said, Yeah, I remember. You've changed a lot." "But you haven't changed at all. You've just got taller," Benson said. Then they started walking. Benson asked, "Where were you going?" Joshua thought a little and said, I was going to Miss Thatcher's restaurant. I want to see someone there." "Where were you going?" Benson said, "Lipankai. I'm going to Lipankai." He continued, "What do you do to make living?" Joshua said, I work in a farm. How about you?" And then they both laughed at Joshua's question. "Why are you going to Lipankai?" Joshua asked. Benson replied, "Someone reported that all the people of Lipankai have disappeared. I am the assistant of a detective coming from Kleinort City." Joshua stopped and thought. Benson said, "What's wrong, Josh? Why did you stop?" Josh replied, Nothing, sorry, yeah, move on." They set off again, and shortly they arrived near Lipankai. While Joshua had a weird smile on his face, he asked, "Officer Benson, may I know the size of your shoe?" Surprised by his question, Benson looked at Joshua, and he found Joshua's face insane and weird. Joshua killed Officer Benson and wore his uniform and threw his body into the water well where 5 bodies had fallen into. He walked towards the village, and a bit later he heard someone's voice. "Stop! Stop!" Joshua hid behind a tree. He also saw a man running away from a detective. To have the detective's trust, he arrested the man and took him into the detective. "I'm Detective Amber Caton from Kleinort Central Police Department, and you are..."
"Charles, my name is Charles. I was sent to help you."
The Wolf Eater was waiting for an opportunity to find his wallet and escape after he met Detective Caton. Detective Caton said to the Wolf Eater, "Charles, take a look around. See what you can find. Let me know if you found anything." The Wolf Eater walked away angrily. He knew in which hut his wallet fell, and he was afraid that Detective Amber would find it. That's why he had to make up a plan to get the detective out of the hut. He thought for a while and came up with a good idea. Immediately, he called out Detective Amber. "Mr. Caton! Mr. Caton!" A few minutes later, Amber and Howard got there. They were terrified and voracious to know what happened. "What's going on, Charles? What did you find?" Amber asked. The Wolf Eater answered, "Don't you smell it? It smells like a corpse. I thought it might have something to do with the lost people of the village." After they took all the bodies out of the water well, Amber turned to the wolf eater and said, "Go to the restaurant by my car and call for an ambulance and backup." The wolf eater knew that this is the only chance he's got to take the wallet and run away. So instead of going to the restaurant, he hid the detective's car among the trees. Then he went to Howard's hut to find his wallet. But all of a sudden, he saw Amber coming towards the hut. So he quickly hid and waited to see what'll happen. Detective Amber entered Howard's hut. He took the wallet and opened it. The wolf eater was scared. He looked around and found a big branch on the ground. He entered the hut and he hit the detective in his head, which made him pass out. Howard was sitting next to the corpse and still staring at the body of the young man. At this very moment, the young man opened his eyes and sat. He looked around dizzily and said with a trembling voice, Where am I?" After half an hour, Detective Anwar Caton opened his eyes and realized that he has been tied to a tree. Anwar saw Joshua Lamb, the wolf eater, before him. The wolf eater said, "Look, I didn't want anything to happen to anyone, but unfortunately it did. If you had only come back 5 minutes later, I would have found the wallet and gun." Anwar said, "You didn't want anything to happen to anyone? God damn it, you killed all the villagers and took out their hearts." The wolf eater replied, "I only anesthetized them. Someone else was supposed to kill them." Anwar said angrily, "Who did this? Who do you sell the hearts to? Whom do you work for?" The wolf eater smiled and said, "Those hearts are not for sale." Anwar got surprised and said, I don't understand. So, why do you take the hearts out?" The wolf eater answered, "Don't worry. Soon you'll understand everything. I'll take you where we took the hearts to. And after you, it's Howard's turn." The wolf eater took out a syringe and approached Anwar. When the young man opened his eyes, Howard was still sitting next to the bodies. You okay? We thought you were dead," Howard said fiercely. The young man, who was confused, said, "Where am I?" Howard answered, "Near Lipankai village." "Who are you? Why were you in the water well?" The young man told him everything he remembered. Howard asked surprisingly, "What's your name?" The young man answered, "I'm Charles Benson." Howard knew what had happened when he heard the name. He got up quickly and said, Stay here. I go and call the detective." Howard ran to the village. Then he saw the wolf eater. Quickly, he hid behind a tree and saw that the wolf eater was going towards Amber with a syringe in his hand. Howard really didn't know what to do. A few minutes later, the wolf eater walked away from there and went to the water well. Officer Benson was looking at the bodies sadly. But once he saw Joshua Lamb coming to the water well, he remembered everything and said, "Why did you wear my uniform?" Joshua was surprised to see Benson alive. Then he smiled and said, "Hey, you still alive, classmate?" Suddenly, Joshua noticed that Howard is not around and he got scared. He asked Benson, "Where's Howard?" Benson didn't answer and looked at Joshua angrily. Joshua rushed towards Officer Benson. The wolf eater came towards the village carrying the body of Officer Benson. Then he heard the car sound and started running. From a distance, the wolf eater saw Howard getting into the car and taking the detective with him. He dropped Benson on the ground and ran to the car, but it was too late. The wolf eater knew that this was not good at all. Then he remembered what his boss told him to do if he didn't make it. Go to the red farm and submit yourself. He lifted Officer Benson off the ground and walked away disappointedly. Anwar was laid in the back seat, and Howard was going to Mrs. Thatcher's restaurant so that he could call the police and tell them about the terrible happenings in Lipankai village. The wolf eater was sitting in front of a man in shame. He raised his head and said to the man with a trembling voice, "I'm sorry." And at that very moment, 3 whistles were heard and the man ran out of the room in a hurry.